everybody, welcome back to two-dimensional design. I want to give you a tutorial on acrylic markers. Now these markers are going to be necessary for your exercise number 1, and I'd like you to use that if you can. I am going to open it up to micron pens if you cannot get a acrylic marker. Sometimes people have difficulty getting these or getting out to get them. If you do, then you can always use your micron. The micron pens are a little more expensive, so I want you to save those actually for your line variation project coming up. So let's talk about acrylic markers real quickly. This is what one looks like. This Molotow is I believe, one of the premier manufacturers of these acrylic markers. They are full of acrylic paint. They have some components to them. One is the cap, which is very important that you seal that cap, or this will all dry out very quickly. Now this one has actually been left open, so watch what happens here. I go to use this pen and there's no mark because this is dried out. And if you could see the tip, you see that's kind of flattened, and I want you to see that you can pull that out and you can flip it over to the round side. These come in rounds and they come in points. This is a 1.5 millimeter marker. Okay, so you can do that. Now you can actually put that down. That is called a nib. You can actually buy a new nib and just put it right in there. See how easy that is? And you can just continue. If this is full of ink, you could just continue with that. So the nib is important, okay? You can buy those in packages of 2, like this. This was $1.50 for 2 nibs. You can get them in different sizes, 1.5 fine line, 1.5 round, and things of that nature. Now I use needle nose pliers for this because I don't like to get full of acrylic ink. I always find myself doing that. So you have the cap, you have the nib, and then you have this piece here, which actually holds the nib into the spring area. Now this area comes out, and you can then fill this cartridge with more acrylic. So that makes these types of markers always permanent. In other words, you can use these over and over and over again and refill them and refill them. Now you can't put color into it once it's been black, so you want to stay a black pen, a colored pens, and things of that nature. So this is the refill. So this refill will do this about 4 or 5 times, and this is about $6. So it's more inexpensive, of course, to just keep the pen, change out the nibs, keep the cap tight, and refill it with ink, and that will last you almost forever, the pen itself. The pen will be about $6, full of ink. The ink is good, usually for about, I don't know, I think they say about 400 meters, if you could believe that, which is about 1,300 and something feet of a continuous line. That's a whole lot of line. So that will be plenty enough for your project to just get one 1.5 millimeter. Don't do more than that unless you want to start collecting these. I know I have a lot of students that want to begin their collection of these acrylic markers. Now there's also this right here is a 2 millimeter, excuse me, this is a 4 millimeter. Now 4 millimeter will give you a line like this. That's a pretty consistent black, but this is paint, once again, not ink. Now if we go to the 1.5, which this one is here, I'll lay a line down here. You might ask yourself, why is the 1.5 the same size line as the 4 millimeter? Well, it's how much you wear down your nib. Okay, if you wear it down, it'll get kind of fat and just get that line fatter and fatter. If you draw on canvas, for instance, which will start to wear down your nib a lot more, that real fine point that you had on there at one time will just continue to get bigger and bigger and bigger. Okay, but you can start off these 1.5s with a brand new nib in it that is a point like an ink pen, and get this really fine ink line. And you're going to need something a little bit finer for your exercise that you're going to do. Okay, now know that these markers, they come in gray also, which is really nice if you need that. if you want to get involved with these. Now, I'm going to say how I'm opening this over my work. I'm going to say you don't ever want to do that. You want to go to your paper towel that you need to keep always as you're working with these pens. Go open it and make a mark so it doesn't, make sure it's not going to flow out all over your work of art. Sometimes you open it on top of your work of art and all kinds of drops come out, and then that'll ruin your piece. So you have to be careful with this. Okay, let's see what kind of, this is a 1.5 also with a much finer line. You see how the variation in the line will be, and that is based on what type of nib you have. Okay, so know that Molotow makes these really large ones. I won't open this because what happens is these things just start spilling. So you have to be very careful opening these. This also is a deco color. This is a water-based. This is a polymer resin, has more of a polymer resin bond in it, which means it won't reconstitute. And I'm going to talk about that in just a second. But you can look on the pen itself, and it'll tell you the qualities of the pen, whether it's archival ink, or archival acrylic pigments, or whether it's a water-based pigment, and things of that nature. So you want to make sure it'll tell the light fastness and things of that nature. Okay, so you don't want to get a water-based marker like this big Sharpie. This is what is it? Forget the size of these. There's a big, like 15 millimeter, something like that. And they make a beautiful line, and the side is a line. The problem with these Sharpies is they're water-based. They're not truly acrylic. So in other words, they don't have a polymer resin bond in it. So they will say they're permanent, but this will reconstitute. If you get into humid climates, sometimes this will just start leaking all on its own. It'll start running on your work. So you want to make sure you don't use these. You want to have archival acrylic inks, and that way that they're permanent. And this is for the future if you go into wanting to use these in works of art and maybe be able to put a coat of varnish on them without them smearing all over. Okay, water-based will just smear on you. For instance, this Sharpie looks beautiful, but if you start laying out the line, if you press too hard, look at that dot that comes out. So this is a sign of a cheaper pen that when you press down as you're moving like that, or pumping, they call that on these markers, that it should not flow additional acrylic out like this. And this does. And I say they never call themselves acrylic. By the way, they say poster paint. So this is just color and water. And when that dries, I put a little water on there. It'll just smear all over the place. So be careful, okay? Now, some of the bigger pens, they all come in these huge colors like this. So if you want to play around with these, you're certainly welcome to do that. But your requirement is just 1.5 millimeter. Understand that, that Sam Golden and Leonard Booker were the inventors of acrylic in the early 1940s. And through 1946 and 49, they started a company called Magna Paint. And Magna Paint was the first company ever to start producing acrylic paint. But there did not have a polymer resin in it. That's very important. That came later with Liquitex in 1955. And that's a French company. And they gave us the first commercially viable acrylic paint. Now, about markers themselves, the felt marker was invented in the 1940s, but it had an oil-based or ink, chemically made black mark it made. Let's just put it that way. Like these. I have my friends overseas in Thailand and China still use these pens. You can smell them the minute you open them, like you can these Sharpies. These are ink. They're not paint. And they are a base that is not conducive with acrylic going on top of. So you can never paint acrylic over these. You can do over marks on your acrylic paint if you wanted to with these. But try to stay away with these unless you know what you're doing with them. They're toxic and hard to smell, by the way. So you're very aware that you're using these oil-based. So the felt tip marker that we see in Sharpies and all these came about, like I was saying, in the 1940s. But trying to figure out when acrylic markers first came on the market is a little difficult. I know for sure that they've been around for 15 to 20 years, so somewhere in that time frame. So they're relatively new to the world for artists, and we're getting used to using them. A lot of people do some magnificent things with them. Understand that you can get a number of colors if you want. As a matter of fact, I believe that there are over 50 colors available in these acrylic markers. So if you like to draw with color versus paint with color, these are very good to use. In our class, you're going to use some brushes and some acrylic paint, and you're going to use the acrylic marker for your exercise number 1, and that's going to be the only exercise you use it in. So try to pick it up if you can, okay? If you can't, let me know, and of course you can always use your micron pens. Until next time, thanks a lot. Take care.